The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
And on the website, in case if you would just give a little taste of that before we join Richard, about Canada's Vision TV, Obama's forged birth certificate scandal. So if you do a quick drop, and you can, again, it's a half-hour show. It is up on our website, along with the pictures from the book yesterday. That's so remarkable. Level Zero Heroes. There's numbers of things up there to take a look at. But Case, open the show, please.
Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. Barack Hussein Obama, the 44th President of the United States and the first African-American to occupy the White House. His presidency became mired in controversy when a number of researchers and political opponents alleged that Obama was not eligible under the Constitution to be president because he is not, they claim, a natural-born U.S. citizen. Further, the leaders of this birther movement, as it became known, charged that the president and his aides produced forged...
You can go to the website, 710knus.com, and watch it. Without further ado, please say good morning to Richard Syrett, our guest. Richard, good morning. Welcome to Denver, Colorado, and 710 KNUS, and thanks for doing the show.
Hey, good morning, Peter, and my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, a little bit about your background and what you do so people get a full sense of yourself, and then the show, and then we'll talk about the issue.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I'm a broadcaster, not a conspiracy theorist, although I find conspiracy and political subterfuge to be a fascinating subject area.
You and I both. I tell people there's a reason in the United States of America we have something called the RICO Act.
Absolutely.
And it's racketeering and corrupt organizations. And if there are no such things as conspiracies, which people try to play away from, which I don't, why do we have a RICO Act?
That's precisely true, Peter. And I like to say that I call my program a conspiracy show. I kind of flaunt it and put it in people's face because a lot of people have a problem with the term, and I'm here to take the word back.
Yep.
Because it's a legal term.
Yep.
Criminal conspiracy charges.
Yep.
We're so ready to accept the fact that corporations, for example, commit conspiracies. They collude, price fixing, they manipulate labor markets. We accept that, but we have difficulty believing or accepting the fact that politicians, who we love to complain about, corruption, yet we don't believe that a couple of them might get in a room and, concoct some plan, some illegal activity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why we can't make that small leap.
Well, people, I think, don't. How do I say this? It's maybe too impossible for people to grasp, but if you read anything about organized crime, particularly since RICO, that's how these guys end up spending the rest of their lives in penitentiaries. They get RICO'd, and they have conspired to do something, or conspired against someone, or together have conspired to, you fill in the blank, but RICO proves conspiracies are real.
Yes, there's no question. And why people have a problem with it, I think part of it is it's part of self-preservation. If we believe that the current occupant of the White House is an imposter, is some sort of sleeper agent, or there are various theories as to why why he was placed there, if in fact that's what happened. Mm-hmm. That just entirely destroys one's reality. It's too shocking to the system, and so part of, I think, what prevents us from buying into conspiracies is our own self-preservation. We don't want our lives and our reality to be deconstructed. We have enough things to worry about just to get through the day.
That's a home run. I interrupted you completing your bio, Richard, with apologies. Go back and complete, if you would, please.
Okay, so about 20 years radio, television experience. I started off as a producer for talk radio, covering what I call sort of the workaday reality, the municipal garbage strike, provincial budgets. By the late 90s, I had my own show, and I had to figure out how am I going to fill 3 hours. I don't want to talk about that other stuff, so I gravitated towards the big questions, the things that have always fascinated me, and I felt that there was a niche there that wasn't being properly serviced. And so I gradually sort of introduced these topics about political subterfuge, political assassinations, and yes, I also talk about. I should be upfront about this. I talk about paranormal, UFOs,
oh, yeah. Sure,
because it's an area that people want to know more about.
Oh, I love it. I mean, let me ask you this: Are you U.S. or are you Canadian?
I'm a Canadian, although my ancestors are from New Jersey, and I'm probably the one Republican, libertarian sort of leaning
You're my guy.
Guy in Canada amongst 35 million registered Democrats.
But you know what? We just got done reading this, getting ready to speak with you. I saw this. Case, could you run that in real quick, that polling data that was done? Because we were going to do a follow-up on it. I think the guy's name is Richard Dean. I just got done reading about the percentage of Canadian citizens who don't buy here, Case is giving it to me. He's our morning show producer. Canadian TV, 62% say Obama. Do you know Dean Garrison? Do you know who Dean Garrison is?
Dean Garrison, I do not.
Well, he wrote the piece, and about what a large percentage of Canadian citizens don't believe the Obama story is a straight story. And the fact that you don't know him makes it even better, but we're going to get the guy on the radio show. His name is Dean Garrison, and he did the piece on the 4th of this month, so it's a 6-day-old story, and it's interesting. He cites you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what paper does Dean write for?
It's from Freedom Outpost is a website, and we can Google it, Freedom Outpost, and his name is Dean Garrison, and I'll just read you the first paragraph, and he cites you. He said, there are two definite schools of thought within the birther movement. However, more than not, you're only exposed to one. Not all birthers believe that Barack Obama was born in Kenya, and I'm one of them. In fact, many believe this is a somewhat irrelevant, and he said many, like myself, believe Barack Obama Sr., not a citizen of the United States when Jr. was born, that our president may be a citizen but not a natural-born citizen. He goes on, it's doubtful you ever see that in American-owned media outlets devoting programs to this debate. Seems unlikely 6 years later. Then he cites you. Richard Syrett decides to go where American media refuses to go, has devoted an entire episode of his program. And he goes on, he really is, and he talks about Canadian broadcaster Richard Syrett interviewing, and he goes on through a list of people. So there it is. I mean, and you are cited in that piece.
Oh, well, thanks for bringing that to my attention. I wasn't aware of that.
It's Freedom Outpost is the website, and I think he's in Canada.
All right. Well, I'll definitely have a look at that.
So, with apologies, when did you come on to the story that by the way, maybe even a better question to ask you, as personal belief, do you believe the story, the, quote, official Barack Obama story told in books like Dreams from My Father, his speeches, the lionizing newspaper stories and books that are written, do you believe that story is straight?
No, I don't. And I have to be, clear here. I'm not. I didn't attend J school. I don't consider myself to be an investigative journalist. I'm a broadcaster. Yeah. I provide a platform for other people to speak. However, so I do, and I'm always open about my opinion. I don't believe the official story. I rarely believe the official version of events we get from the mainstream press. There's always an agenda. There's always something else, some subtext there that we're not getting. So it's no different with the Obama story. This is an exercise in Hollywood myth-making.
Thank you. I have become and you're going to be hopefully recruited into being part of the family that does radio shows with us. But these friends of mine who are birther people have put together something called the Coincidences, and it was sent to me about a month ago, and we put it up the other morning. I'll just read this to you, and they make this case, and this comes back to your television show. Any of these coincidences, whether taken as a single issue, would not appear to be much, but when he says when you take them as a whole, and I'm paraphrasing, a computer would blow its main circuits if you ask it to calculate the odds that have occurred by chance alone. And my friend told me, sit back and get a favorite beverage and then read and ponder these coincidences. And they said, and superimpose that on a bigger picture. And I'll just read you part of it. And it goes on for pages and paragraphs. Barack Obama just happened to know 60s far-left radical William Ayers, whose father just happened to be Thomas Ayers, who just happened to be a close friend of Obama's communist mentor, Frank Marshall Davis, who I believe is his biological father, who just happened to work at the left-wing or communist-sympathizing Chicago Defender with Vernon Jarrett, who just happened to become the father-in-law of Iranian-born Valerie Jarrett, who Obama just happened to choose as his closest White House advisor, who just happened to be, and it goes from the happens to the happens, Valerie Jarrett also happened to work for the city of Chicago, just happened to hire a woman, Michelle LaVaughn Robinson, later Mrs. Obama, who just happened to work in the Sidney Austin law firm where former fugitive from the FBI, Bernadine Dohrn, just happened to work, where Barack Obama just happened to get a summer job. Bernadine just happened to marry to William Ayers, whom she just happened to hide out with in the San Francisco Marina with a guy by the name of Donald Warden. Warden changes his name to Khalid al-Mansour. Now, he just happens to be financial advisor to the Saudi prince who just happened to donate cash to Harvard, for which Obama just happened to get a critical letter of recommendation from Percy Sutton, who just happened to be, it just goes like that, and your head comes off.
Sure. Yeah, Percy Sutton, the borough president of Manhattan.
Yes.
And Mansour had confided in Sutton that he was raising money to send Obama to Harvard because there are no records of any loans. And Mansour, of course, is one of the major contributors to CAIR, C-A-I-R, which in 2007 the U.S. government has indicated may have been involved in terrorist funding.
Yes.
So you can add that to the pile. And then you could go on with the coincidences, but never mind the coincidences. You just look at the evidence, the evidence that could be admitted in court today if any court would
hear it.
Would listen.
I agree.
Exactly.
They won't hear it. If you're just joining us, this is a remarkable man, Richard Syrett. I've watched it. It's up on our website, 710knus.com, and it's video. It's Vision TV in Canada. This is the host. Obama's forged birth certificate scandal and America's media shamed. Richard, why do you think, other than idiot radio shows like this one, why do you think seriously, why do you think no one wants a bite at the apple? No one wants to take this on?
In many cases, it's the equivalent of kissing the third rail. I think I call it the fur-lined trap. If you're a working journalist, let's say you're working in the White House, you're a White House press reporter, and you have to have your credentials approved by the Secret Service. Yeah. And you've got a good paying gig. You may send your son or daughter to a private school. You've got a nice car. You've got a nice house. Maybe you live across the river in Virginia. And all of a sudden, you're gonna give that up. You're gonna put up your hand and ask a potentially damaging, embarrassing question. You'll get to ask one, and then never again, and then you're of no use to your employer. So you're done. That's the fur-lined trap. Nobody has to tell you. It's never so overt as to say, "Do not ask this question. Don't go there." You know where your bread is buttered.
It's fascinating, and I think political correctness plays out a major part of this. I know it's been 7 years ago when I got onto the story, and I was immediately called a racist. That was the first thing they screamed at me, "It's racist, it's racist, it's racist, it's racist." And, that doesn't trouble me. I figured, hey, you got to, step into this job. You got to get big shoulders and, put on your big boy pants and take these guys on. And the fact that there was no return evidence, that isn't true. But the only cry that came at me was racist. And it's interesting, there were political cartoons written in the local newspapers about the show, and I was blogged and I was columnized, if you would, that I was a racist. And all those people have fallen away. And the story is stronger now than it's ever been before. And I have a friend, Joel Gilbert, who you may know, and Gilbert said in his Dreams from My Real Father, I think he makes a tremendous case. But, of course, then the only retort that came back to that film, and I'm sure it's happening to you as well, is that it's racist. Well, that doesn't answer anything, does it?
That's racist, a pedophile, in the 1950s, commie sympathizer.
Oh, yeah.
These are the last refuge for scoundrels and cowards and people who have nothing to back up their side of the story. What do they do with someone like Phil Berg, who I've gotten to know and interviewed probably a half a dozen times? Who is a lifelong member in good standing and a member of the NAACP.
Well, absolutely. He's a Dem.
And a registered Democrat.
He's a Dem.
So what do they do with someone like him?
They don't talk about him. They don't deal with him. And actually, some things have been said about Berg. Berg happens to be Jewish, and they say some pretty nasty stuff about him behind his back. But, again, I have been in a situation for, 7 years. And I've always called these people and been very polite when they do a column or a cartoon or something, and I invite them on the radio show. And I said, would you like to come in and sit? And what do they say? No, thank you. Mostly they say, I would not appear on your racist show.
There you go.
There you go.
They play that card. They think it gets them off the hook.
I've
done a number of programs also on global warming. I don't subscribe to anthropogenic global warming.
It's jive. That's right.
And when you ask people to come on, like Dr. Suzuki, who's sort of a patron saint up here in Canada, and about 50 years ago, he was a scientist. He was a geneticist. He experimented with fruit flies. Well, that was 50 years ago. So now he's a broadcaster, and it's hard to call him a scientist. But if you ask someone like that on the program, someone like him, they say, well, I would not, I wouldn't lower myself.
Thank you.
Okay, they just will not engage in a dialogue.
I've had it.
What are they afraid of?
No,
what are they afraid of?
We have a mayor and a governor. They won't come on the radio show. I'd ask them some questions they don't want to answer. So, but this is the people who have been critical of the show. And that's the First Amendment. I welcome your criticism. More times than enough, I'll read their critical emails on the air to the audience. But I said, well, come on a radio show. Not a word. They won't. And then the retort generally is, I would not appear. I wouldn't be in the same room with you, or I would not appear on that racist show, or words to that effect. In other words, it's a dodge. They don't want to deal with it.
Well, I take solace in the fact that ultimately I think it'll be proven they're on the wrong side of history. Let the record show.
Let me do this. I want to put you on hold, and then when we come back, you're fabulous. The film is up on our website, 710knus.com, and then just begin and have you tell the story as you believe it to be the life of Barack Obama and why they take it off the tracks and why they won't deal with the truth. We have time to do all this, Richard. I sure hope so.
I hope so too, Peter.
All right, hang on, sir. We're going to do it. All right, Richard Syrett. Now, our website is 710knus.com, and you can see Richard Syrett's movie, and you can begin to watch. And you can watch it tonight. You can watch it later on this afternoon. But it's available. It's there. All right, 710knus.com is our website. And it's a television show. It's going to take you some time to sit down and watch it. But it is there. It is out of Canada. Richard Syrett is our guest. It is Canada's Vision TV, and they have looked at the truth of the birth certificate, and it's up there. And you can sit down, you can settle in, take your time either throughout the day and watch it, or tonight, or tell friends about it as well. So again, what do you think the story really is, given the work that you've done?
Well, let me first issue this a caveat, if you will, in anticipation of people maybe labeling me as a racist. I am in love with the notion that the United States could elect a black president. I think it's fabulous. If I was an African American and I had a black son or daughter, I would be over the moon. So regardless of all this other nonsense, the idea that a black person can be elected president, I think, is wonderful. But here we have someone who we know less about this person than we do any president that's ever been elected.
We know more about James Buchanan than we know about Barack Obama.
That's right. He doesn't have the security clearance to be elected dog catcher. I mean, he wouldn't qualify to be a member of his own administration.
He could not pass E-Verify.
Yes, could
That's
he get
the
a
truth.
driver's license?
He could
he
not.
get a driver's
No.
license in the District of Columbia? I don't know.
True.
So, but, let me just say I'm thrilled with the idea of a black president. But there are, huge issues here. What do I think happened? Let me give you the broad strokes. Unfortunately, I think we've arrived at a place where the United States is essentially being run by the NSA. And I think what happens is that individuals are selected to be the face of the administration. They want to pick someone who can be controlled, so someone who has obviously a shady past and a history. How else do you explain, the fact that we elect, or you elect someone from the state of Arkansas, with a sex addiction problem? Just the amount of corruption that exists in the higher levels of power is just astounding. How do these people, are they not vetted? How do they get to where they are? Well, they're selected for that very reason, because that way you can control them and manipulate them, I believe. So I think Barack Obama was selected and groomed, and obviously there were some problems. His birth certificate, his passport records, his medical records, all of these things, which would have disqualified him. So these records had to be expunged or massaged or hidden. And so essentially we have an occupant in the White House who is the face and the voice of the administration, but I don't think he has any control over the situation. I think he's a prisoner of the White House. I think he's being told where to sit, what to say, how to say it, when to say it. This is where we have arrived in history. Maybe I'm overreaching, but that's the way I feel.
One of the questions I ask myself is, watching the foreign policy decisions, or watching any decision that he makes, allowing uncounted numbers of people into the country illegally, whatever it is, if we knew who he really was, would that be an explanation for what he does?
It's quite possible. Here's my feeling is also this, that in order to become the president, in order to be selected by these, I'll call them the unelected oligarchs, who really run the country, you have to meet certain criteria. One is you have to be a globalist. So you have no real allegiance to the United States.
I agree.
And so it doesn't matter if it wasn't Barack Obama, it would have been somebody else who fits that criteria, who checks all the boxes. Oh. And what better face than an eloquent, seemingly educated African American?
Yeah, like I said, I see this as a very long-term issue, that Barack Obama did not arrive in a vacuum. And you point out Bill Clinton. I also put George Bush in that category. These people have, I don't know how old you are, but I am a boomer. And the baby boomer generation has produced 3 presidents. And all 3 of them are disasters. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and the current president. That's what our generation has given America, these 3. And they all have really kind of murky ideologies. You don't know quite who they really are. But the showstopper clearly is Barack Obama.
Yeah, this is the culmination, I think, of all their efforts. I think they've got this down to a science now. Yeah. They can put anybody in the White House they want, and we'll buy it. We'll go along with it.
Yeah, the press in particular, and of course he takes his first bow here in Denver. This is where the convention was. And by that time I was on to the story. And no one would show a birth certificate. And all that stuff gets deep sixed. And I don't know if you believe this. His SSN, his Social Security number, belongs to a guy who's dead who lived in Connecticut.
Yeah, I think there's something like 25 different names attached to some of these.
Well, he's changed numbers. He's changed numbers. His draft registration number. I think he played a game that he was a foreign national. He's used that. There's too many people that know the story. In fact, his publisher had a biography that he wrote that talked about him being born in Kenya. I think he's foisted himself over as different people throughout his life. And when he was a little guy, you know, he's not responsible. But when he turns 18 years of age and he shows up at Occidental College, he's now responsible for what he says. And the arrival at Columbia University, which I think is another one of those seminal moments, I believe, I mean, to come out of a 2 years, I mean, he comes out of Occidental, which is a kind of a party school on the West Coast. And he arrives at a prestigious Ivy League school. And I've talked to people who went to Ivy League schools. The Ivy League schools want to spit on me, but how to arrive, you go to a 2-year party school and then arrive at an Ivy League school with 2 years under your belt in another school as a C student at best.
And nobody remembers you.
And why did they let him in?
Exactly. There's that. But nobody seems to remember him from Columbia.
Well, but does he tell them? He allegedly rooms with these Pakistani guys. Does he tell them that he's Indonesian American? Does he tell them he's Muslim American? Does he tell them he's Muslim Indonesian? What passport? You know, the whole passport lockdown. You don't see this man's passport. You can't. Who did he say he was, and what passport did he travel under? And then I remember Jerry Corsi's great work where he comes up with even another name called Syrett.
Yes,
and
yes.
people thought he was crazy, and then he shows the documents that that's a name that he travels under.
Well, and then we go back to 2008 and the breach where his passport records were examined illegally, not once, not twice, but on three separate occasions.
I agree.
And John Brennan has been sort of attached to that breach as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, what were they doing in there? Were they expunging certain elements of those the passport records? I happen to think so.
Yeah, and I think his selective service card, I think he's run this foreign national scam so long that when he gets into Chicago, and why would he go to Chicago? He has no roots in Chicago in the mainstream story, other than I think his real father, Frank Marshall Davis. I think his connections in these, you know, just happens to be people who all come out of Chicago. But his credibility is in New York City. He lives in New York. He lives in California. He lives in Hawaii. He lives in Indonesia. Out of all the places in the world, he chooses Chicago. That's bizarre in and of itself.
Yeah, the whole narrative is kind of a patchwork. It's very choppy and inconsistent, like someone has sort of cut and pasted it together, not unlike his long-form birth certificate, in a very hasty manner.
And when he gets there, then they realize they want to get him into office and run him, and they thought anybody that does any checks on what historians call your bona fides, well, he's never registered for the draft, so they make up a draft number, because all this other time he's told everybody, same thing with the Social Security. I believe I know from my reading, there's a set-aside series of numbers for foreign nationals, Social Security numbers for foreign nationals, not for U.S. nationals. I think he flew with the Social Security number that was legitimately gotten when he was working at Baskin-Robbins as a kid, assigned to a foreign national. By the time he gets to Chi-Town, he's going to do what he's going to do. They got to get him or they get him one out of Hawaii. I don't know what role his mother or his grandmother played in all of this, but clearly that's not his number. He doesn't. And remember when Bill O'Reilly told somebody lies that his father got it for him when his father went to Harvard, he got a Connecticut. And I said, everybody said, Bill, Harvard's in Massachusetts.
Right.
And then O'Reilly O'Reilly clearly lied so many times. But then when you look at it, who gets access on Super Bowl Sunday to an exclusive interview with the president? Bill O'Reilly. Yeah.
From an investigative point of view here, and if this ever gets to Congress, a congressional hearing, and I know that's Sheriff Arpaio's goal, I can't see that happening. But I mean, if it ever gets there, where do they begin with this story?
No, you don't.
They've just got to hone in on one thing, and I think what they have to do is they have to start with the long-form birth certificate.
I agree.
Look at the 207 points of evidence that were submitted to the Alabama Supreme Court. Let's just start with that. Because as Mike Zullo has pointed out, Sheriff Arpaio's chief investigator, the whole Social Security number issue is just beyond their capability at this point. I don't understand why. It would seem to me that would be something fairly easy to check, but apparently it's very involved, very time-consuming. So they've got to start with the birth certificate.
I agree.
Those 207 points. And when you have a forensic document investigator who worked for the very same law firm representing Obama and comes out and says this is 1,000% a forgery.
Sure, it's a forgery.
How do you possibly ignore that?
You can't.
No, you can't. But somehow the mainstream media is managing to do just that.
I invented this kid that I called Jimmy down the hall. And Jimmy actually made that birth certificate. He's a little computer guy. And there was no need for the night flight to Hawaii to bring it back and the rest of that stuff. I mean, it could have been sent as a PDF file. They could have sent it in the Internet. But it arrives in this weird fashion. But having said that, the only person in the history of Hawaii that can be found by really hardcore investigators it says father's race, and it says African. African is not a race. It's like saying father's race, Canadian, father's race, North American. There are sub-Saharan Africans, there's Saharan Africans. Sadat was an African. Mandela was an African. African has no meaning. It's a continent. It's not a race. But Jimmy down the hall, this is my theory, Richard, Jimmy down the hall, who's little PC, little geek, he can't, every other birth certificate from Hawaii in that time period says Negro or colored.
That's right.
Jimmy can't say that. That's not, political correctness is re-education camps. And Jimmy can't say Negro or colored. Jimmy, it's incapable of Jimmy can't. So Jimmy comes up with, he takes African American, and senior is, if he's the father, is from Africa. So Jimmy invents, and anybody that wants to look, and it says father's race on Barack Obama's birth certificate. I know you do it in the movie, or you do it in a television show. He's the only guy, sucking air, who was ever born in Hawaii in that time period, 5 years either way, who says whose race is African. Now, what does that tell you?
That tells you that this was put together obviously much later than like his Select Service card, which has likewise been proven to be a forgery, and the numbers, the series of numbers, are closer to the 2008 issue numbers. So
that's where they ginned it up. They made it.
Exactly.
And they did it with his SSN. His SSN isn't legit SSN.
Yeah, there's clear indication that there are at least 9 layers on that document. It's not a simple Xerox copy of a paper document, and it was put out there very, very hastily, I guess, in order to sort of shoot down Jerry Corsi's book, which was coming out like a week later.
Oh yeah.
But by the time they decided, well, we better work on this a little bit more, it had already been out online, and 150,000 people had seen it, so it was too late. They just had to go with it and hope for the best, and luckily they had the cooperation of the media.
And they had a total laydown. I remember here, Mike Litwin, the columnist at the Rocky, and all these different people. Oh, they didn't even examine it. And I said, wait, I'm going wait a minute, this is a con. No, it isn't. It's legitimate. And I went, no, it isn't. Find me another kid born in that year in Hawaii that has a birth certificate that says that a race, either his mother or father or both, says African. You can't find him. It doesn't exist. Do you really think at that hospital and that one time somebody decides African is a race?
Even the presence of, if you look at the typeface and the kerning,
yes.
The kerning, which is produced by an electronic typewriter,
didn't exist.
Yeah, that just didn't
exist.
Didn't happen with the basket type manual typewriters.
No, I agree with you.
207 points of evidence at least before the Alabama Supreme Court, and they basically said, no, we're not going
to look at it. Yeah, no. Hang on. Can I keep you again, Richard, through another pause?
If you'll have me.
Oh, you damn right. Hang on, please. Richard Syrett is with us. Now, go to the website. Again, it's up, 710knus.com. 710knus. I'm Peter Boyle. 70 the high today, 65 Thursday. We're going to get a great weekend, too. But the Reisters are here, and we're going from air conditioning to furnaces. That tells you what things are going to do. Please, again, back to our guest. And this is not his last appearance. I can tell you right now, this guy's a home run. And Richard Syrett is a broadcaster, as people in the business say. He's a TV guy. And they did a television show. I'm going to ask you this. I should have asked you this in the beginning. On Vision TV, and we have it up for you to watch it today, tomorrow, over the weekend on 710knus.com on Barack Obama's forged birth certificate scandal, America Media Shame. I got to ask you this, Richard. why did you decide to do this, and what was it that triggered you to do this television show?
Well, I should mention that I also have a weekly radio show, Peter, also called The Conspiracy Show. It airs Sunday nights, right. And we have about 24 U.S. affiliates. If you can't pick it up in your market, you can live stream it at zoomerradio.ca.
I promise we will.
And I started talking about this on the radio before the television show came into existence. So it was just kind of a natural carryover. I had interviewed Phil Berg about a half dozen times the last time at CFRB in Toronto, which is a 50,000 watt heritage station, and it was the night before Inauguration Day. I interviewed Phil for the last time, and then the next day I was summarily marched out of the radio station.
Yeah, I know that one.
And fired.
Yeah.
But not necessarily for that, although I'll let people draw their own conclusions. So, you know, I want the TV show to be sort of an historical document. These are the issues that are of tremendous import today in the 21st century, and maybe in 20, 30 years from now, people can look back and say this actually happened. This was going on. Yeah. And it's important to get it out on the record. What side of history are you going to be on?
Yeah. I can't tell you how many hours and people I've spent time listening to and talking to and reading and watching and thinking. There's no doubt in my mind that this man's story, this life story, is not straight.
No. And people need to get over themselves and over the idea that this is Republican versus Democrat.
I agree.
There is no Republican Party. There is no Democratic Party.
I agree.
What we have are soap salesmen who do the bidding of these unelected oligarchs who run the country. And they think in broad terms. They think 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. So they pick a candidate who's going to carry that baton. Doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. They figure out, okay, what is the country in the mood for? Oh, they want a left-leaning African-American president. Yes, it's time. Let's pick one who will do our bidding. Next time around, it might be a conservative. Oh, they've had enough of that. Let's give them a conservative who will also carry our baton. It's about continuity.
You know, the interesting thing, and I dance with everything you've just said, and sometimes I accept, sometimes I reject. But I do come back to this, that this man who sits in the Oval Office today, we know nothing at all about him. And when we see him make decisions after Mubarak is overthrown and the Muslim Brotherhood seizes power in Cairo, knowing what the Muslim Brotherhood's methodology is, what the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna, said, the nature of Islam is to dominate. I almost know it like I know that the beginning of the preamble of the Constitution. And yet the Brotherhood is now in power in Cairo. And they continued to send the battle tanks. They continued to send the F-16s. And I'm thinking to myself, the Muslim Brotherhood, Mr. President, why are you sending them armaments? And perhaps it's all explicable back in this murky part where you don't know who he is.
Well, we do know that his brother or his half brother.
Oh my!
Is a major fundraiser
Absolutely.
for the Muslim Brotherhood.
Absolutely.
So there's another dot we can connect. Throw that on the pile.
And that's the Barack H. Obama Foundation that Lois Lerner overnight on a weekend gave tax exemption to, even though they were running as a tax-exempt organization for over a year. Lerner never leaned on them, went after the Tea Party, grants them that, and you see pictures of this guy with terrorists. They're together. And he's wearing the robes on, and he's wearing in Arabic it's saying, from the water to the water, or words to that effect, meaning the state of Israel is to disappear. And the guy's standing there. And he fundraises in Maryland. His headquarters are in Maryland. He's a real guy.
Yep. It's too good to be true. I mean, it's all there. It's the biggest lies are protected by public incredulity. I mean, it's too obvious. It can't be real.
I come to this point, and I will have you back. We'll let people watch the show, 710knus.com. What would you like to leave us with, Richard? What is it that you came away with after this research?
I guess it's just another piece in this vast puzzle that is informing my worldview, which is becoming an increasingly cynical one, although ultimately I put everything through my faith filter, and I know the good guys win in the end, so do not despair. But everything is fitting together. Our countries are not run the way we think they are. There is a vast, to quote Hillary Clinton, there is a vast conspiracy. It's neither right wing or left wing. That's rear view mirror thinking about left wing and right wing. There is just a monolithic group here that is running the show, and they want to distract us with things like voter fraud. Mm-hmm. It's not voter fraud; it's systemic electoral fraud.
Agreed.
When you have voting machines that can be basically unplugged,
can be rigged, yeah,
and tallies can be manipulated, know that they can put anybody in office they choose.
I still tell people, and I'm no fan of Al Gore's, I still think Al Gore won, and they weren't going to let that happen. I swear. And Al Gore is a buffoon and an idiot, and he's a fall down. He's everything you want to call him. But I still think they rigged the outcome of that one. I swear to God, I do.
And yet he lied. He just lay down and died, didn't he? He rolled over.
Yeah.
Why? What was his payoff?
Well, they in the Nixon-Kennedy fight, when it was so close to call, and that they turned it in Cook County, they know they brought it in dirty, and Nixon went away. And I've talked to Pat Buchanan, I've talked to so many smart people and said, why, without a fight, Nixon went away? I don't know, pal. I just tell you this much, man. You have met a kindred spirit, and I think the world of what I watched when I watched your show, and your appearance here today means a lot to me, and we'll have you back, I promise. But thank you for your time today and your hard work.
Oh, I appreciate it. And for the detractors, they can just say, oh, he's some crazy Canuck, who drinks beer and talks about UFOs and Bigfoot. Why should we believe him?
How do you do that, eh? Thanks, brother. Thanks a lot.
Great to meet you.
You too, sir. Thank you. All right, you can look at it, 710knus.com.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.